Peace and welcome, everyone. I'm Aisha Musa of AIM Education and Consulting. I'm a contributor here at KIST. In this video, we'll be looking at sex and sexuality in early Hadith literature. This project began as a conference presentation in 2017 and has since grown to a full book chapter on marriage, sexuality, and the people of Lot. I hope to do a future video, inshallah, on that broader topic, but in this video, we'll be focused on early Hadith literature. I'd like to begin with several quotes from prominent Muslim academics, which show the thinking that frames many of the current discussions of sexuality in Islam. First, in her 2006 book, Sexual Ethics in Islam, Keisha Ali writes, and I quote, "The desire on the part of some self-identified gay and lesbian Muslims to have exclusive and publicly recognized same-sex relationships, and to do so in a way that falls within an Islamic framework, is without precedent in Muslim history," end quote. She also writes, quote, "Their desire to have sexual relationships that break conventional Islamic rules, but that aspire to the highest standards of Muslim ethics as they understand them, exists in tension with vital theological and juridical principles, aside from those forbidding illicit sex." In this context, Ali highlights two principles. One, quote, "One should not expose sinful behavior, whether one's own or someone else's," end quote. And two, quote, "Denying certain rules is a greater offense than breaking them," end quote. Next, in Before Homosexuality in the Arab Islamic World, 1500 to 1800, Khalid el-Ruwayyib writes, quote, "There was simply no native concept that was applicable to all and only those men who were sexually attracted to members of their own sex rather than to women," end quote. The ideas expressed by Ali and Ruwayyib raise several key issues. One is tension between conventional Islamic rules and the highest standards of Muslim ethics. Another is the presumption that same-sex activity is inherently sinful. This presumption was explicitly reiterated in a webinar on LGBTQ issues held by California's Yaqeen Institute in June of 2022. They did so citing the sources of Quran, Sunnah, and Ijma', that is, consensus of scholarly opinion, acknowledging that scholars may also use qiyas or analogy. The third issue raised by these ideas is, what is it that's without precedent? And there are two things that are without precedent, according to these scholars. One is the idea of exclusive and publicly recognized same-sex relationships, and the other is the concept of exclusive same-sex attraction. Turning to the question of conventional Islamic rules and Muslim ethics, both are derived from the sources. For Sunnis, these are Quran, Sunnah, scholarly consensus, and analogy. The Quran is the primary source, believed by Muslims to contain God's words. And the Sunnah is seen by the vast majority of Muslims as complementary to the Quran and as providing a practical example of how to implement the Quran's teachings. Derivation is a human activity that requires understanding and deliberation. After the Quran and Sunnah, the other source cited in support of the presumption that same-sex activity is inherently sinful and unequivocally forbidden is Ijma', consensus of scholarly opinions. This is the third of the four Sunni usul al-fiqh, or roots of jurisprudential methodology. What needs to be acknowledged about Ijma' is that it's a consensus of human opinions. Those opinions may be derived from the sources of Quran and Sunnah, but derivation is a human activity. People interpret the sources to form opinions. Those interpretations are formed and informed by the lived experiences of the interpreters. In this way, normative religious rulings represent the normalization of the lived experiences of those to whom the community has granted religious authority. Now let's turn to the sources we'll be focusing on in this video, Hadith. I realize that there are Muslims who challenge the authority of Hadith, either in whole or in part, and that there are Muslims who argue for a Hadith-independent concept of Sunnah. But for the vast majority of Muslims, the Hadith are the vehicle through which we can access the Sunnah, the example of the Prophet. Here's a list of the Hadith collections that make up the Sunni canon, those texts which are considered most authoritative as sources from which to derive religious rulings. At the time I'm making this video, these and other collections are available at the links displayed here. I will also include the links in the description for this video. Among the other texts I've used are Ibn Ishaq's Sirah, which comes to us in the edition of Ibn Hisham, the Musannafs of Ibn Abi Shayba and Abdur Razzaq, and the Tahawi's Mushkil al-Athar. You can find these texts at the links in the description for this video. So what do Hadith have to say about sex? Muslim Sahih is the second most revered collection in the Sunni Hadith canon. In his book of Zakat, that is obligatory charity, there's a section titled Every Good Deed is Charity, Kul Ma'ruf Sadaqah, where we find it reported on the authority of Abu Dhar that some of the Prophet's companions complained to him, Messenger of God, the rich take all the rewards. They pray as we pray, they fast as we fast, and they give charity from their excess wealth. The Prophet responded by saying, Hasn't God provided you that from which you may also give charity? Certainly, in every glorification of him is charity, in every magnification of him is charity, in every praise of him is charity, every declaration of his oneness is charity, every command of the good is charity, every prohibition of wrong is charity, and in your sexual intercourse is charity. They responded saying, Messenger of God, if one of us fulfills his sexual desire, is there reward for him in it? The Prophet said, Do you think if he does it unlawfully, he bears the responsibility of it? Likewise, if he does it lawfully, he has a reward for it. This report is also included in the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal. The most revered Hadith collection in the Sunni canon is the Sahih of al-Bukhari. In Bukhari's Book of Conditions is a section on the conditions of dowry and the marriage contract, in which we find it reported on the authority of Amr that the Prophet said, The conditions that are most worthy of being fulfilled are those which make private parts lawful to you. The critical distinction is between lawful and unlawful sex. Conventional Islamic rules see same-sex activity as categorically unlawful. This is based primarily on the story of Lot, which is told in the Quran and interpreted by most Muslims, as it has been by Christians and Jews, to condemn sexual relations between people of the same gender. The Sunnah plays a key role in deriving those conventional rules. What do the Hadith tell us about the act of the people of Lot? The earliest text in the Sunni Hadith canon is Malik's Muwatta. Malik wrote the Muwatta as a book of fiqh, but because it contains Hadith, today it's counted as part of the Sunni canon. In his book of punishments, it's reported that Malik asked Ibn Shihab about someone who does the act of Lot's people, and Ibn Shihab said that he should be stoned, whether he's married or unmarried. Several statements about the act of Lot's people are attributed to the Prophet in various Hadith collections. These are, Whomever you find doing the act of Lot's people, kill the active and the passive one. What I fear most for my community is the act of Lot's people. And God has cursed whoever does the act of Lot's people. The act of Lot's people is understood to involve sexual activity primarily because of the Quranic verses in which Lot describes his people as approaching males lustfully. There are also Hadith reports that call a man approaching his wife in the rear a lutiya as-sughra, minor sodomy. Despite the condemnation of the act of Lot's people, scholars disagree on how it should be punished. They disagree for several reasons. The Prophet never ordered a specific manner of punishment. Moreover, the Prophet is never said to have punished anyone himself. And the command to kill those who do the act of Lot's people contradicts the Hadith that says a Muslim's blood may be spilled only for murder, apostasy, or adultery. What do we learn from Hadith about context related to the act of Lot's people? In the Book of Purification, in the Sunan of Ad-Darimi, It is reported on the authority of Amr bin Dinar that Lot's statement to his people in Quran 29:28, "Indeed you commit lewdness that no one in creation has committed before you," means that a male never jumped a male until the people of Lot. The Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba contains a report that tells us Lot's evil old wife went to his people and said, "Tonight Lot is being visited by the most beautiful and best-smelling men I have ever seen." So they rushed the door and nearly overwhelmed it. Finally, in the Sirah of Ibn Hisham, we find the story of Lakhniya, which tells us Lakhniya was an evil man, doing what the people of Lot did. He used to send for the young sons of kings and sexually assault them in a room he had made for that purpose, so that they could not rule after that. These stories show that the act of Lot's people involved force, rape, and attempted rape. This is very important context that must not be ignored in interpreting and using the story of Lot. The Quran also provides a crucial hermeneutic for interpreting the Sunnah. In Surah 21, Ayah 107, "We have only sent you as a mercy to creation." If we believe this Quranic declaration to be true, then we must question any interpretation of the Sunnah that is at odds with it. The Quran has this to say about previous generations: "That is a community that has passed away. They have what they earned, and you have what you earn. You will not be asked about what they used to do." This makes us responsible to not simply follow what those before us have decided. It's time to reframe the discussion. It's not about gay and lesbian Muslims trying to reconcile competing identities or making Islam palatable to the West. It's about assuming our responsibility for approaching the Quran and Sunnah and seeking to derive rules from them that aspire to the highest standards of Muslim ethics.